Beyond the Ice. Part 3. Conflict and Growing Connection. Chapter 5. The Frozen Vyriat Scout. The discovery came unexpectedly, as most earth-shattering revelations do. The team had been trudging through a narrow ice canyon, its walls rising like frozen sentinels, trapping them in an eerie silence. The storm had stripped away loose snow, leaving behind glassy, jagged ice that reflected the pale sunlight in fractured beams. Lena was the first to notice something unusual. Her equipment beeped sharply, the screen flickering with an unfamiliar energy signature buried deep within the ice. "Got something," she said, adjusting her scanner. "It's faint, but definitely not natural." Kael stiffened, his hand instinctively hovering over his knife. "A glitch?" Lena shook her head. It's real." They followed the signal, weaving through a jagged path until they reached a sheer wall of ice. Then they saw it. Encased within the translucent ice, perfectly preserved, was a figure unlike anything they had ever seen. A humanoid, yet distinctly alien. Its elongated limbs and smooth, silver-gray skin gave it an otherworldly presence. The body was motionless, frozen in time, yet its posture wasn't one of death. It was composed, almost as if it had chosen this stillness. Its armor-like clothing was adorned with symbols, eerily similar to the petroglyphs Aria had been studying. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Aria took a shaky breath. "It's a Vyriat," she whispered, reverence and disbelief mixing in her voice. Lena's gloved fingers hovered over her scanner, her mind racing. "This can't be real." Ethan, the historian, crouched closer, his academic curiosity outweighing his unease. "A scout, or an explorer," he murmured, pressing his hand against the ice. "If the Vyriat were here, then they weren't just a myth." Arya's heart pounded as she studied the alien's face. Serene, almost peaceful. "We need to document everything," she said, voice steadier now. "This could be the key to understanding them, to knowing why they were here." Kael, however, wasn't looking at the frozen being. He was scanning the canyon, his stance rigid. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Arya shot him a look. "Kael, we just made the discovery of the century." Kael's gaze flicked to her, sharp and unwavering. "That's what worries me." Before she could respond, Lena's scanner emitted a sharp beep, a sound of warning. She frowned, tapping the screen. "That's not right." "What?" Arya asked. Lena hesitated, her brows furrowing. "The energy signature. It's not just present. It's reacting to us." A tense silence fell over the team. Kael tightened his grip on his weapon. "I knew it." Ethan scoffed. "It's frozen. It's not going anywhere." "You don't know that," Kael shot back. His voice was quiet, controlled, but beneath it was something else, something close to fear. Arya took a careful step closer to the ice, her breath fogging against its surface. The frozen Vyriat scout was still, yet there was something about it. The unnerving stillness, the way its symbols seemed to shimmer faintly beneath the surface. For the first time since their journey began, doubt crept into her mind. What if it wasn't just a relic? What if it was waiting? Tension in the cold. As the day wore on, tension thickened in the air. Lena and Ethan worked closely, deciphering the symbols on the Vyriat suit, their whispered discussions filled with excitement and urgency. At one point, Lena handed Ethan a tool, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment. "You're not so bad at this," Lena muttered, teasing. Ethan smirked. "Coming from you, that's high praise." Their connection was subtle but undeniable, a quiet counterpoint to the storm brewing elsewhere. Meanwhile, Kael's unease only grew. He positioned himself near Arya, always within reach, his body tense like a coiled spring. Every crunch of ice, every shift in the wind, he noticed it. Arya could feel his gaze on her, watchful, intense. Finally, she turned to him. "Kael, what is it?" Kael hesitated, then exhaled slowly, his breath a mist in the frigid air. "This thing, it's not just a discovery. It's a warning." Arya frowned. "You're overthinking it." Kael's jaw tightened. "And you're underthinking it." The way he looked at her, protective, serious, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. She wanted to argue, wanted to say that fear couldn't dictate discovery, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease creeping through her own thoughts. A quiet understanding. As they prepared to leave, Aria caught Kael watching her again, his eyes unreadable. "What?" she asked, softer than before. Kael shook his head. "Just be careful, Aria." She wanted to ask why, wanted to press him, to break through the walls he always kept up, but she didn't. Instead, she turned back to the frozen Vyriat scout, a being trapped in time, a puzzle left unanswered. And as they began the trek back to camp, a new question settled in Aria's mind. Had they just uncovered history? Or awakened something far older and worse? Was it watching them too? Beyond the ice. Part 3. Conflict and Growing Connection. Chapter 6. The First Major Decision. The wind howled through the glacial rift like a living entity, its icy breath laced with warning. Towering walls of jagged ice stretched downward into an abyss, their crystalline surfaces glistening under the pale Arctic sun. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a raw, untamed chasm that seemed to defy time itself. The team stood at its precipice, staring down into the unknown. Aria crouched near the rim, running her gloved fingers over the frozen ledge as she studied her scanner. The device pulsed with faint but unmistakable Vyriat energy signatures, stronger here than anywhere else they had detected so far. "This is it," she said, her voice steady, but weighted with caution. "This rift isn't just a natural formation. The Vyriat's technology is embedded somewhere below, but we have to be careful. If we rush in blindly, we could trigger something catastrophic." Kyle stood a few feet away, his posture rigid, arms crossed tightly over his chest. The sharp lines of his face were set in an expression of barely contained impatience. "We don't have time for careful," he countered, his voice firm. "That storm's moving in fast, and this rift isn't stable. Every second we waste standing here is another second we're exposed." Arya turned to him, frustration sparking in her eyes. "And rushing in without a plan could get us killed." The tension between them was thick, their opposing instincts clashing like icebergs colliding beneath the surface. Arya was methodical, cautious, always analyzing before acting. Kyle, on the other hand, had spent too much of his life surviving on gut instinct. And right now, his instincts screamed move. "You don't get it, Arya," he said, stepping closer. "We're standing on borrowed time. If we don't make a decision now, the storm will decide for us." Arya's jaw clenched. "This isn't just about survival, Kael. It's about understanding. The Vyriat's energy dome, their technology, it could rewrite everything we know about history, about science. We have to do this right." Kyle exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You think I don't understand what's at stake? You think I don't care?" His voice had lost its edge, the frustration giving way to something raw. Arya hesitated. There was something different in the way he said it, in the way his gaze flickered, not with anger, but with something closer to pain. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Kael's eyes drifted to the horizon, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing, the wind filling the silence between them. Then, finally, he spoke. "I was part of a team once," he said, his voice rough. "A damn good team. We had a choice, move fast or take our time. I wanted to wait to be sure, but the leader," he swallowed, his jaw tightening. "He decided to push forward, and it cost him his life." The words hung in the frigid air, heavier than the ice around them. Arya felt the sharp sting of his confession, the unspoken weight behind it. This wasn't just about survival for him. It was about losing people, about the scars left behind when a choice went wrong. She softened. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. Kael gave a humorless chuckle. "Don't be. It's just the way things go. You hesitate, you lose. I learned that the hard way." Arya held his gaze. "But this isn't that mission. And I'm not your old team leader." Something flickered across his expression. Recognition, maybe. a reluctant acknowledgement that this was different, that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't leading them toward the same fate. Lena and Ethan, who had been watching the exchange, finally stepped forward. "We can compromise," Ethan said carefully. "Aria, you get time to take proper readings before we go in. Kael, we move the second things look unstable. No second guessing." Lena nodded. "Agreed. We all want the same thing here. To make it out alive with answers." The ice beneath them groaned, as if echoing the weight of their decision. Arya exhaled slowly, then looked at Kyle. "All right, we do it your way, if you let me get the readings we need first." Kael studied her for a beat, then finally nodded. "Deal." As the team prepared to descend into the rift, something had shifted. Not just in their decision-making, but between them. Arya had always seen Kyle as reckless, all instinct and no patience. But now, she understood. His urgency wasn't just about strategy, it was about survival, shaped by loss. And for Kael, Arya wasn't just another scientist slowing him down. She was someone he didn't want to see make the same mistakes. The storm was closing in and the ice beneath their feet was uncertain. But for the first time since their journey began, they weren't just a team of individuals anymore. They were one step closer to trusting each other. And that, more than anything, might be what kept them alive.